features and functions, and if you make those the easiest to use.
Okay, got it going here. Perfect. Hi, everybody. This is Jordan with Disc Golf Heaven, and today I have a special guest in, somebody who's been playing disc golf for a long time, one of the more, I guess, technical thinkers in the game when it comes to instruction and figuring out how to play and how to instruct beginners, helping them get going, keeping the game fun for them. So I'd like to welcome to Disc Golf Heaven Jack Trageser. Is that how you pronounce it, Jack, your last name?
I pronounce it Tupp, Jack Tupp.
Jack Tupp, there you go, great. Perfect. PDGA number 9715. I think you're the lowest PDGA number I've had on the website or on the interviews so far.
Yeah, most of my friends have numbers smaller than mine.
Smaller than yours, that's funny. Well, Jack, you've got a journalism degree from San Jose State. You've been a copywriter for decades, from what you tell me. You started back in mortgages, but you said you've been writing in every position, including your water company job, product development for mortgages, startup stuff, sales and marketing for the home loan industry. You've been writing in all of your positions throughout your career. What is it about writing and disc golf that's so fun for you?
Together or separately?
I guess come together.
You know, writing, it's so hard. I've been doing it for so long, and it's something I'm fairly proficient at. And so anything that I'm passionate about, you know, is naturally what I'm going to want to write about. As far as for a living, it's kind of funny. When I was at San Jose State, I thought I would be smart and get a degree that I would be able to leverage, you know, for decades into the future, and not just go for the typical English degree where you end up stocking shelves in a supermarket. So I was real smart. I got a print journalism degree, which is kind of
print journalism degree. Okay,
yeah,
it wasn't underwater basket weaving, but it was close, right? Print journalism. So tell me, what does that do for you?
It's going away. What does it do for me? Well, yeah, back then it was like, well, hey, the newspapers are going to be here forever, so if I have to, I can always fall back on a job writing for a newspaper, and now we know how that's
or a magazine.
gone.
Yeah.
But I ended up getting into software for mortgages, so mortgage technology software, integration with Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, and real exciting stuff like that. And it's always, if you can write well, there's always opportunities. Even if you don't have a writing job, there's always a need for somebody that can communicate well writing and speaking. So I always just tried to make that one of the things I had going for me in business.
Yeah, very good, very good. When did you start playing disc golf?
I started playing disc golf, I suppose, around 1986 or 87.
Okay.
Somebody, a neighborhood friend of my brother's, out of the blue one day, invites me to go play Frisbee golf at a course at UC Santa Cruz. And so I said, I love Frisbee, so I said, I'm up for that. And it was basically a hike through the Santa Cruz Mountains, and back then, UC Santa Cruz had no baskets. So we were throwing at these 4x4 posts in the ground, or in some cases, they would just use a light pole. But
object golf, yeah.
I'm left-handed, and it was a downhill dogleg left. And after the first two holes, I had kind of a guess on how to make the disc go both ways, and I figured out how to throw an anhyzer, and it just held a perfect line, drifted right to the post. It didn't ace it or anything like that, but just the idea that it was this big downhill shot, and I was able to craft it and make it go left. I was hooked on the sport from that moment on.
Yeah, so you threw an anhyzer, and you didn't know what you were doing, and it went where you wanted. All of a sudden, you're yeah. that one good shot, right? That's all it takes.
Yeah, I kind of had that guess on how to make the disc go left, and it worked, and it was just really cool to see it go the way I wanted it to go. So,
cool.
And it's kind of funny because De La Viega was there in the ground with baskets, but a full year and a half would go by before I even knew, A, that De La Viega existed, and B, that I even knew baskets existed. You know, it kind of blew my mind the first time I went to De La.
So you're talking mid-'80s in the rock. Was that even out yet? Mid-'80s?
Yeah, The rock, that was pretty much, people would have 3 or 4 discs, and back then, for the most part, there was no premium plastic, so if you had a
Right.
bag of discs, you might have 10 discs, and you'd only have 3 molds in different forms of beatenness. You'd have maybe a rock, and a cyclone came along a little bit later, but that's how you had different discs. You just have your super beat rock, your moderately beat rock, and your new rock.
So you're talking DX plastic, maybe some pro plastic, but nothing really that's going to stand up over time, right?
Yeah, well, actually, back then when I first started, there was nothing but, and it wasn't called DX. It was just plastic.
It was just plastic. That's what they made. Yeah, that's great. Was DJs around then? Anybody who's a Santa Cruz fan knows of DJs. They still sell discs, right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, the convenience store just on the way before you go up over the Highway 1, I believe, up toward the course there. Number of friends of mine have had DJ stamped discs, rocks in particular, from the 80s and 90s, and you find one of those, they're usually pretty darn beat up, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So you started writing for disc golf in particular. You told me, what, 2006? Is that right?
That's about right. I don't know the exact date. I started a blog a free blog at Blogspot, just called Frisbee Brain. Actually, the name of the blog was Daylaw Blog.
Daylaw Blog. Yes, I remember that.
But the URL I think was frisbeebrain.blogspot, and I wrote there for a little while, and then when I decided I was given all kinds of lessons for free anyway, and I had the idea to start up School of Disc Golf. Number one, as a more catchy title for a blog, but also I would just say, hey, if I'm writing about disc golf, I might as well put it out there that I'm doing lessons and team building events, and that business has grown and grown completely organically. If you type in disc golf lessons in Google right now, I don't do anything to advertise, and I don't even do anything to sophisticated in terms of search engine optimization, but I'll still come up in the top page of the results just because there's so much content there.
Wow. Very cool. So yeah. How did that transition into School of Disc Golf, and then now more recently to playdiscgolf.org?
Well, the two are not really connected, and I can get into the entire Play Disc Golf vision if you like. But School of Disc Golf, like I said, it just sort of, I believe that I have on my logo established, I have MMX to stand for the fact that I officially established School of Disc Golf in 2010. And it's been growing and growing, and now I'm slowly but surely building up a stable of instructors in different towns and different cities. I set up my first satellite School of Disc program for a parks department in Massachusetts. So, and once again, that's really just emerging as the demand is there. I'm not trying to take a big step forward and offer up a big plan, but one thing I would love to do, though, imagine if you're a touring pro and there was a platform, and I know someone's tried to do something like this, but if there was a touring pro and you could go in there very easily and say, I'm going to be in these towns in this park at this date and time, and someone could actually very easily go in and book time with that touring pro, would be a great way for them to bolster their income as they're on the road. And then you got people that are more like me that have families or for whatever reason aren't out there traveling, but they're kind of like the established pro in that particular market. So that's down the line for School of Disc Golf.
Yeah, very cool. Man, that stuff is happening all over the country with other sports, golf and tennis and baseball, whatever, right? There's no reason that can't happen with disc golf. Where do you see that going as far as the digital connections and the distribution of instruction?
Well, unfortunately, right now, you're talking about both sides of the coin when it comes to the internet. There's all kinds of instruction available for somebody, and most of it is well-intentioned, but not very accurate or not very helpful. If someone just goes, Googling. It just depends on who they're going to listen to. I get clients all the time that talk about, videos that they had watched ahead of time, and they say it's tough because one person will use a certain analogy and someone else will stress something else, and they seem to conflict with one another, and it just leaves them confused. But it's like anything else. The more demand there is, the more people will step up to meet that demand, and the more high quality people will step up. You see it with everything else in disc golf right now. I mean, I think that those that are really focusing on putting forward a very well packaged product in terms of whether it's either live web broadcasts of disc golf or whether it's the tapes, the audience hasn't justified how great that product is yet. And I just think it's because there's not, and I'll get into that when we talk about playdiscgolf.org, but there's just, they don't have a big enough pool. They're making a great product, and they're way out ahead of what the demand is. And I think in some other areas, though, where people actually are being asked to pay for it, you have a more realistic match of how many people want it and how many real quality providers are stepping up to match the need.
Right. It kind of sounds like we're talking about mirroring the growth of golf. But man, that was 40 years ago, 50 years ago when that started, where they only had, a couple thousand people when they started to show 2 or 3 holes, the final 2 or 3 holes in broadcasting golf. Now in disc golf, we're to the point where, man, we're putting an entire tournament. Utah Open was just online, and they put the entire tournament, every single hole, for I think 2 groups, FPO and MPO, online. And man, there were less than 1,000 people watching on average that I saw. That's just hardly anything when it comes to viewership, right?
It is really. And I think that there's 2 philosophies when it comes to growing the sport. You can break it down a lot of different ways. This is just one of them. But I think one of them is the mindset of let's try to publicize our top tier, top pro events, are the best players in the world, the best events, and then tons of people are going to see this, or they're going to want to see it, or you're going to have someone that's going to want to sponsor it, and more people will see it, and then more people will be interested in playing disc golf. And I think that's exactly, like I said, they're putting forward a great product, and no one would ever question the dedication of these people who are literally turning their lives into disc golf, getting out on the road. I'm sure some of them are going into debt to do it. I think it's upside down. I think, and I know some top voices in the game that agree with me that you have to grow the base, and it's all about. And I think there's a real good chance, just the way that disc golf is, where it's played, the kinds of holes. It's a catch-22 that the most compelling holes in disc golf are the ones that are the hardest to film and convey a true sense of what's happening out there live. It's hard for that to come through in video if you're going through a really interesting hole with a lot of tunnels and gaps and things like that. But it's something that we're gonna see. I think is that disc golf is going to remain. I believe it's always going to be much more of a hit, much more of a significance to society as a recreational activity, as opposed to entertainment that you sit and watch.
Mm-hmm. So a play, not watch perspective by most people who are involved with the game, and especially, in my opinion, when it comes to new people, new viewers, new participants. What do you think?
Well, I agree. And just think about it as a marketer. You look at the demographics of a group. You look at the psychographics, which is kind of a marketing term for what motivates these people to make the decisions they make. And you look at the characteristics of a typical disc golfer. Typical disc golfer is someone that 10 times out of 10, you give them a choice to be out there playing versus sitting and watching. It doesn't matter who it is. They're going to pick playing. And the nice thing is,
99.9% of the time, absolutely.
Yeah. And let's say you use the analogy of ball golf. Someone might say, well, I would actually like to be out playing on a world-class course, but unfortunately it costs too much money, or it takes too long for me to play. I don't have a whole Saturday to give up to it, or I can't get reservations. I can't get a tee time or whatever. It's so darn accessible. You know, you don't have to schedule it. You don't, most of the time you don't have to pay for it. If you do, it's a pittance. You just show up, and I know sometimes it blows me away to think that I have De La Viega open to me anytime I want to play, you know, almost, you know, no cost if you don't count the tiny little parking fee. And it's like Augusta and Pebble Beach rolled into one.
Yeah.
Just amazing.
Yeah, it is. World-class course, man.
It's a weird circumstance, but it's great while it's lasting.
Right. Man, there's a lot of things happening in this game. I know you're excited. I'm really excited to see where it's going. And one of the things that you're doing now, actually moving to our next topic here, you just, I can't say you published it because you haven't published it yet, but you just finished a book, and your Kickstarter campaign was just fully funded, 110% of your campaign goal. The book's called The Disc Golf Revolution. Tell me about that. Where's it going? What's, you know, where did it come from?
Well, as far as where it came from, you're gonna there's gonna be a little bit of a reveal when the book comes out to say exactly where it came from, the circumstances that caused it to be written. It's a pretty interesting story behind the story. The nuts and bolts of the book, though, it is a journalistic approach to not just it attempts to go far beyond your typical all about disc golf type of book. The best one of those, of that flavor of book on disc golf, just came out recently. I think it's called The Definitive Guide to Disc Golf. And
oh yeah, Justin Menichelli and
book.
Yeah, but that's an awesome book.
It's a great book, but it's your typical kind of like field manual. Like here's a little bit about the history. Here's the how you play. Here's the different type. Here's all the equipment. You know, that type of stuff. My book includes that, but it's a small portion of the book compared to the overall. The overall in my book, I'm talking about things like, first off, I start off by explaining what a great game golf is in general, whether you're talking disc golf or ball golf. And I start off talking about ball golf, and I list all the things that are great about it, all the wonderful life characteristics that it helps you build, like self-control. Hopefully people learn that over long enough, and integrity.
Yep, the honesty, all that stuff.
Yeah, all that stuff. And you know, it's got the same things that disc golf have going for it in terms of you can play by yourself or with other people. It gets you out in the fresh air. It's, you know, a very low impact form of exercise, or it can be. But then I talk about all the barriers. What's that?
Yeah. It's a lifetime sport.
And
all of them are.
Yeah, lifetime sport, exactly. So I talk about the barriers, though, to golf, and then I very methodically go down and I explain how disc golf has all the pluses of golf, but wipes out all those barriers. Usually, if people stop and think about the significance of that, it is huge that golf is finally available to everybody. After 500 years of being this elite sport, it's now exactly the opposite. And most people don't get the full gravity of that statement because either A, they feel that disc golf must be sort of a diluted form of golf, that it doesn't have nearly what golf has in terms of the complexity and the nuance and the requirement for athletic skill, or they think that they don't really get that it's as accessible as it is. And so throughout the book, I'm going to great lengths to explain that disc golf, not only is it as complex as ball golf, you could make a great case that it's more complex in the sense that the disc can be made to do so many more things than a ball can, and the fact that you know, a disc actually has, part of the book I interviewed a physicist friend of mine who's a disc golfer, and he explains that a flying disc, the shape of it has 6 degrees of freedom, which translates to all these different things that a disc can do. A ball only has 2 degrees of freedom. So I talk about the accessibility. I talk about the fact that it's a completely organic, grassroots grown sport. And that's pretty unique in the history of sports in Western civilization. Almost always there is some deep-pocketed interests that are sort of artificially propping up the sport and moving it along because there's money to be made from it. Disc golf is very unique in that, and I provide dozens of examples, but it's very unique in that the entire growth of the sport is almost entirely because you have the same model popping up again and again and again, where there's a person that's discovered disc golf, brings it back to their town. They have the intelligence and the energy to say, they start looking around and they identify a place that could benefit from putting a disc golf course there. They're able to rally a group of people. They're able to successfully lobby the local government to agree to it and say, look, if you just let us use this land, I'll raise all the labor we need to put it in. We'll somehow raise all the money for the equipment. And then voila, you've got a public service that is going to serve the community for decades to come, thousands and thousands of people that the government didn't have to pay anything for. And now you're getting local governments that was the model before, and the only thing that's changed now is that they're a lot quicker to say yes because they see it working everywhere else, and they're also oftentimes willing to contribute funds to it too. But in all of these cases, though, unlike ball golf, where from the very beginning it was wealthy landowners that just did it for their own personal amusement.
Yeah, create some income.
And then, and it wasn't, the whole idea of public links came way longer down the line, and even then you still had to pay for it.
Yeah. All that stuff adds up to disc golf being, like you mentioned, the key word there is accessibility. Anybody can play. I mean, you don't have to be a certain age range. You can have a 4-year-old out on the disc golf course playing, You take a 4-year-old to a ball golf course, and you might be in trouble. They probably won't be able to play. You might not even be able to have them on the course, right? Same thing goes for great-grandma that's 94 years old, who can walk in the park and have fun, but can't hit a ball more than a couple hundred feet. I mean, maybe even that, right? So accessibility is major there. So what do you see? Go ahead.
I was going to say that accessibility, too, it means so many different things, and it has such far-reaching implications or ramifications. For instance, the fact that in disc golf, pretty much anybody can afford the best, the highest quality, most expensive equipment. That right there knocks down barriers because, think of things like skiing, for instance, where you can buy the best equipment, you can go helicopter skiing, or you can go to the best resorts, and it cuts out a big chunk of the people, or the best golf courses, these private courses. In disc golf, you've got people from all walks of life in terms of socioeconomic strata, and they're all blending together seamlessly because there's really no way that you can set yourself out on a disc golf course and say, hey, look at me, I'm the rich guy, I got the fanciest bag and all the best discs, and the guy who's a day laborer says, yeah, I got a grip bag too. I got a cart too. Exactly, and I don't know about you, but I'm blown away by another thing about disc golf course is they're mostly unpoliced, and yet altercations on a disc golf course are so rare. People just are they're brought together on a level playing field, and they get along. Like I usually, even if people are getting along, you sense sort of a oil and water separation and tension there. And with disc golf, that just doesn't happen.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. Well, now that you have the book ready to go, your Kickstarter is complete. What are the next steps, and where's the book headed?
Oh, okay. So the next steps. The next step is there's copy editing left to be done. The cover, I believe, is done. You've probably seen the cover.
Yeah, that looks great.
Post an image of that. Juan Luis Garcia of Overstable Productions did a fantastic job on that. And the plan right now is to work with him to design the interior of the book, get all the pictures chosen and laid out and all that, and then go and self-publish. But since the Kickstarter campaign, I've gotten interest from a traditional publisher who I'm going to be talking to over the next couple of days. So
Wow.
I haven't quite decided which route I'm going to go. There's pros and cons to publishing with a traditional publisher. You get much improved distribution into brick and mortar stores, and I'm sure it's what they do for a living. So in terms of a polished product, I'm sure they turn out a great polished product. But if you self-publish, the amount that you make per book is so much higher.
Yeah,
So
yeah. There's a big trade-off there. 10 cents versus 40%.
Yeah, and the commitment that I made to the Kickstarter backers is that everybody's going to get their books and the rest of the rewards, the shirts, the minis, in August. And I fully intend on keeping that promise. So as it stands now, the book will be published out, printed by the end of August.
Yeah, very nice. I can't wait. There's so few books in our sport that are actual that have some quality behind them. There's a handful out there that are just a few pages that somebody tried to put on Amazon and make a couple of bucks. But then you get to the level of what Minichelli and Ryan Pickett did that you mentioned earlier in the Definitive Guide to Disc Golf. We've actually got an interview with those guys on the website as well. But your book sounds like it's going to be on that level, not on the one where it's only a handful of pages. I mean, you've got over 80 pages of work.
It's going to end up over 300 pages easily. And
wow,
if I can achieve the level of polish and professionalism that they did with the Definitive Guide to Disc Golf, I'll be very happy. The real significance of my book, if it does what I hope it's going to do, for the first time it's going to tell the full story of disc golf, which goes, to me, far beyond, hey, this is a cool new affordable sport, you should try it, and here's everything you need to know about it. The actual story of disc golf, the social significance, I think is one, if I'm successful, I'm telling a story that is going to be oft-told 20, 30 years from now, because it's going to be kind of, I think with disc golf, we're looking at Apple Computer in the early 1980s.
Yeah, I liken it to skateboarding back in the early 80s as well, before Tony Hawk came on the scene. He just obliterated everything, right? We've had Climo, we've had Macbeth, now we've got Ricky. All these guys are growing the sport, obviously, but, man, once you hit that critical mass, kind of like you said with Apple and then skateboarding back in the 80s, I believe that we are right there. I agree with you completely that when this game starts to get into the right people's hands who really choose to make it move forward quickly, and we're on that precipice currently, in my opinion. Where do you see we're headed with the game?
Well, like I alluded to earlier, number one, I think that when it comes to something that people do, an activity, I think that disc golf will be bigger than ball golf in probably 20 years, maybe less. Steve Dodge posted a simple little graph that showed the amount of ball golf courses and their rate that they're actually in decline, and the amount of disc golf courses in the U.S. and the rate of growth. And he's, if the trend continues the way it's going now, and we don't really have any reason to believe it won't, we'll have more disc golf courses possibly, if you can believe it, 10 years from now than ball golf courses.
Yeah,
that's
absolutely.
very possible. But because disc golf is a really sticky problem for anyone that says, I want to really make millions and billions from it, because something is going to have to change for that to happen. It's already built as this free or close to free model. So I think what you'll see, and I talk about this in one of the last chapters of the book, where it's my own little take on the future of disc golf, that I think you're going to see a lot of people that try to capitalize on the fact that there's a big market out there for people that say, you know what, disc golf is really cool. I'd like to play it in a more controlled, manicure, basically they're into the ball golf course experience where they're not completely out tromping around in woods that are unsupervised. So you'll see
you don't have
private
people falling around. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm hoping that doesn't mean that 10 years from now, just about anywhere you can play disc golf, you have to pay something for it. I'm hoping that there will always remain a healthy number of fun, free places to play disc golf. And I think that you're going to see a lot. You're going to see a lot more people like there's a certain set that has a little bit of acreage, and right now they might be thinking it's kind of cool to grow some grapes. This one, out in Northern California, it's a reality.
Right.
People might want to grow some grapes and have their own little fun private label wine. I think a lot of those people that have the land and the money, because it doesn't take that much, as you know, are going to start becoming interested in saying, wow, how cool would it be if I had my own private disc golf course? I know it's a dream of mine.
Yeah, no doubt. I've seen a lot of places lately, a lot of promoters lately start to combine music in particular, kind of events, the venue of a disc golf course. So you've got a tournament, a 3-day tournament in conjunction with some sort of event that attracts not exclusively disc golfers. So it's a larger community event. So it accomplishes a few things. I don't know if you've looked at that, but there's a guy back east, I think it's called a Disc Jam in particular in New York, I want to say. So do you see the things, the future disc golf going in that direction with events, or more of a staying in the grassroots, getting into schools and businesses and moving into corporate events?
Well, I think the more what's happening, it's kind of funny. How disc golf has had this lifelong stigma. The easiest, cheapest joke is disc golf, hippies, pot smoking, that kind of thing.
Living by the river, disc golf pros, living by the river.
And the funny thing to me is that we see marijuana getting legalized in every election cycle. There's 1 or 2 or 3 states more that are approving it, and it's kind of funny that the stigma is off of marijuana itself. Disc golf is even lagging. Disc golf still has that stigma, even though marijuana itself is less stigmatized as an older mindset. Attrition. There's less of those people out there in positions of power to prevent it. And I think with disc golf, what's going to happen is that naturally that stigma will become less and less attached to disc golf, since the stigma itself is marijuana is going away, and more for every there might have been a kernel of truth, because that was kind of like the people that played frisbee, that were really into frisbee in the late 60s and early 70s. It's very easy to see the long hair. Everybody had long hair back then and attach that. Nowadays, of 10 new people that start playing disc golf, the odds are that 7 or 8 of them are very much not the type of person you would think of as the disc golfer stereotype. Now you're seeing a good portion, a healthy portion of my clientele are actually people that would be getting AARP cards. They're over 50. They're over 50, and they're discovering, wow, this is something I can do. It doesn't cost me anything. It gets me outside. I love it.
I can take the kids. I can take the grandkids. I can go anytime I want. There's so many benefits, like you mentioned earlier.
Yeah. So you see. You go to a popular disc golf course on a weekend, and you'll see that borne out. You'll see the people that are out there just having fun, not necessarily the tournament players.
You see tournament players, you see recreationals, first-timers, you see professionals. Pretty much it covers the spectrum of life anymore.
Yeah, it was kind of a long-winded answer to your question, but I do see in the future, the more disc golf just becomes normalized and accepted, kind of like snowboarding on ski hills, compared to where it started. Now it's just, hey, it's a ski resort. Some people ski, some people snowboard. You're going to see different people finding different outlets for it in terms of corporate events or school events, or it's just becoming more normalized, and so it'll become more common everywhere.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, earlier you mentioned that you've been setting up some satellite, teaching offices. I don't know what the best term for that is, but do you see that moving on into the online instruction distribution model, or is it kind of separate and it needs to be personal in person?
It's, I have done some instructing where I have somebody shoot video of themselves, and they send it to me, and then I use a tool to mark it up and evaluate it. And it's worked out okay. I don't think though that the clients have gotten what I would like to see them get out of a lesson. It's really hard to do something like that remotely because I can very clearly see a flaw in what someone is fundamentally doing wrong, say with their backhand, and I can explain it, and I think I'm pretty good at explaining things verbally and in writing
with words.
But
Yeah.
but there's so much, there's so much of communication is nonverbal, and when you're there with somebody, I think the message is a lot easier to digest than if you're doing it over over the phone, over the computer.
Yeah, yeah. Hands-on lessons, I teach quite a bit as well, and hands-on lessons there's something very, very unique when you can put their hand in the correct position instead of trying to tell them the words or write it down as to, no, rotate your hand in this way 4 degrees versus just here. No, you put your hand right here. That physical connection is lost, obviously, in the virtual distribution of instructions. So, man, I don't know where it's going. You can teach piano, you can teach disc golf, you can teach singing online, but being in person, I agree with you completely, has a very unique aspect to it that you don't get, that is lost in translation, I guess is the best way to say it. So, anyhow, so where do you see teaching in the profession of, I guess, following the ball golf game? Do you see there being a national teachers association as far as disc golf goes? Are there going to be outlets throughout the country where you can go to Dallas and get instruction there because there is a school of disc golf satellite office? Do you see that in the future?
If that's in the future, that's way in the future, and I think
in the future. Okay.
Just because, I mean, time-wise, maybe when I say way in the future, I don't mean necessarily time-wise, but in terms of where disc golf is at now, in order to justify something like that, it has to be so much closer to mainstream than it is now. There's just not, and disc golf is something, again with the two-edged sword, but disc golf is something that just about anybody can, if they're inclined to have fun doing something like that, just about anybody can go out their first time, and from their first throw to the end of the day, they've probably improved quite a bit in terms of getting an idea of how to make that disc go forward. And so most people think, and again, remember, this is something, if we have time to talk about playdiscgolf.org, I'll really stress this point, but most people are not, you take the entire disc golf universe, the group of people that play tournaments that belong to the clubs, what I call kind of the inner core disc golfer, that's a really, really small fraction of the overall regular disc golfer. Most people are out there, they're not that good, but they're out there having a blast, and to those people, there's no need for lessons. It's not like ball golf where most people, to get remotely proficient at it to the point where it's just not one big frustration after another, they have a number of lessons. And disc golf's not like that. So, most of my clientele, I had a great run last year where at not this 2017, but the 2016 Masters Cup, 3 of my clients that are actual competitive players, one's a junior that's an up-and-comer, and he won juniors, and he beat just about everybody in AM1s, too, at age 14, I think.
Wow.
One is Trevor Parker, who now is on DGH's top pro team, and he's played, up until that point, that was his 3rd PDGA event ever, and he finished first in all of them, and then Skylar Rain Mustaine won Masters Cup. So I had 3 clients, and they all finished in first place, which was which was pretty sweet. But most of my clients are actually people that have the disposable income that can afford a private or semi-private lesson, that recognize, hey, that's the quickest way. I want to learn how to do it right from the very beginning.
Yeah, they've done it before in other sports.
Yeah, but your disc golf diehard, even if they're not that good, even if they play tournaments, they just don't see lessons as something that they need or want.
Sure.
Or at least private.
That makes
lessons.
A lot of sense. Well,
So
and there's a ton of free stuff out there too. That like you mentioned earlier, it depends on the person in giving the instruction and the person receiving as to if it's going to be effective or not.
Yeah, when we get to that point, which I don't doubt that we'll get to someday, where when you talk about golf as something to do, you're thinking disc golf and not traditional golf. You know, who knows that disc golf way in the future isn't just going to be shortened to golf, and everybody knows when you say golf, you're thinking disc golf, and if you're talking about the old kind, you know, it's probably by then relegated to like polo, guys playing polo with horses, that they refer to that as traditional golf. I mean, it's a lot of stuff you look at now that we take for granted, you think decades ago was barely fathomable.
Yeah, that's right.
So I look towards where golf is something that's accessible to everybody, and people think golf, they think flying discs.
Okay, yeah. So accessibility, that's where the future's going, and I agree that, you know, the ball golf end is decreasing just because of the prohibiting factors you've mentioned, and then disc golf obviously is moving in the opposite direction in a major growth phase at this time. But your book obviously is going to help get that idea and spread the word that we're all out here trying to help do. So, you know, like, where do you see the books and the I guess the speaking and the corporate events? Where do you see that stuff taking you? Are you going to be traveling around the world, or are you going to stay there in your hometown, Santa Cruz, and do it remotely?
Well, I'm going to see how it grows. I would imagine if it is able to sustain me as a full-time career, which it has for a while now.
Yeah.
That there's going to be more travel involved. I just got back from promoting the book in the Rocky Mountains in Denver. I was on Denver, their top local TV station, and I played.
I saw that.
Got to talk to a group. That was really cool, and I would like nothing more than to be a disc disciple, if you will, spreading word about the sport. And in a perfect world, the way the book is designed, it's designed for people like you and me and the other, 150,000 or so disc golf diehards out there around the world as a tool to be used to spread the sport. So ideally, a diehard disc golfer would go, and every time they've got someone that has been going back and forth with them for years, trying to figure out why they're so nuts about disc golf, they buy a copy of the book, they give it to that person and say, if you really want to know what makes me tick, read this, and you'll know. Because I believe that the arguments that I put forth, the research, is seconded by all the other disc golfers out there who know that it's a lot deeper than just throwing frisbees around the field.
Yeah, absolutely. Man, that's a lot of stuff to go over. You've been working hard. Obviously, we've known each other for a handful of years over the phone anyway, and man, I've seen you take your school of disc golf from a handful of articles and then running through to now a complete going to be professionally published book here coming up in August. And I mean, wow, congratulations. You've done great work, and I can't wait to see where you're going in the future with School of Disc Golf and your books.
Appreciate that.
Absolutely. Okay, where can everybody find your book, The Disc Golf Revolution? Can we get that at schoolofdiscgolf.com?
When it's out, you'll be able to get it through schoolofdiscgolf.com. You'll be able to get it through Amazon, through the other popular online sources. Playdiscgolf.org is right now the URL still points to Kickstarter. That'll be fixed. If you want to see what the Play Disc Golf site looks like now, and that's still very much oriented towards the launch of the Kickstarter, so that's going to be changing. But the other URL where it's parked is isupportdiscgolf.org, and that's
isupportdiscgolf.org.
Yeah, and that's really right now that's mostly a placeholder. But really, the vision for playdiscgolf.org is simply, and I alluded to it already, it's the idea that I think is the big, huge thing that's overlooked. Personally, I think that when someone does a little research on disc golf, whether they're thinking of writing a story about it or whatnot, and they dig up that the governing body and the only worldwide organization for disc golf is the PDGA, and that the PDGA has around 35,000 current members worldwide, and that they have in 40 years they're still below the 100,000 mark in terms of people that have ever joined the PDGA. if I'm someone on the outside of the sport looking in and I see numbers like that, I immediately relegate disc golf to that second or third or fourth tier in terms of
fringe sport.
What's important to know. Now, if there was an organization and it had 1 million active members, what do you think the difference in how people would perceive the sport and where the sport is in terms of things to keep an eye on?
That's some credibility.
That's some credibility. So here's the thing that really gets me. Even by the PDGA's standards or by their numbers, they estimate that 2 million or 2.5 million people play disc golf worldwide on a regular basis. Regular basis is defined that by you play at least once a month, okay?
Mm-hmm.
So I think, and that number is over a year old now, so I think we're closer to 3 million. So you try to picture this on a graph. You've got 3 million and compare 3 million to 150,000. 150,000, I think, is about 6% of that total. And right now, all of grow the sport, all that language, all of that, the backslapping, it all occurs, it's insular. It occurs within that 150,000. It's the 150,000 disc golf diehards all talking to each other. No one has ever made a concerted effort to reach out to these people that don't play tournaments. They're not a member of their local club. They could care less about competition, but they're out there every weekend, once every weekend, with the same 3 or 4 other people, and they look forward to it all week, and they have a blast. No one has ever made any kind of concerted effort to engage those people. What I want to do with discgolf.org, in a nutshell, is to properly incentivize the 150,000 to reach out to the other 95% of the people that are regular disc golfers that value the sport and say, hey, sign up for this organization. It's free, and all we're trying to do is stand up and be counted so that we have a number that's going to move the needle.
There you go.
It's pretty simple, and I've got a fairly detailed blueprint that I'm borrowing from one of my biggest successes in my business past, that basically it's not a matter of will it work. If the stakeholders that need to be involved all step up and say we agree, then it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when, and the when would probably happen pretty quickly. It's just a matter of getting a critical mass on both sides of the equation.
Okay, so you've reduced that long-term vision of 10 years to 20 years down to the, I guess, the tipping point, to borrow a Malcolm Gladwell situation. Or, sorry, is that Seth Godin? Anyway, that tipping point is right around the corner.
Tipping point is Malcolm Gladwell.
Malcolm Gladwell, thank you. That situation, I believe, is just around the corner for us, and you're doing exactly what it takes, what is required to have that scale tip to the other end, where we have that 150,000 count promoting the sport to the 2.8 million out there who are casual, regular players, right?
Yeah, it's not as glamorous as focusing on the publicizing the pro side, and it's not as fun either. But I believe it's what's necessary, and really the only way to engage the 95% that right now no one's talking to, that I can tell, the only effective way is boots on the ground. It's literally people talking to other people on the disc golf course, and you multiply that. If you can actually create a system where they're properly incentivized. Imagine if so right now, that's kind of a cool thing that I have a PDGA number that's 9715, right? That's pretty low.
Yeah.
And I won't give, like I said, I got friends that are in the single digits and the double digits and 3, that felt pretty bad for a long time. I got guys that are like number 150 something, and they felt pretty bad for a long time because everybody had lower numbers than they did. But anyway, so right now, that's kind of like a badge, is how low is your PDGA number. Imagine if we were touting a different number and it was a running total of the number of other disc golfers that you've got to join this organization in this collective push towards a 1 million member organization. Imagine if your number, the higher it was better. So right next to your name, there's a 322, and that means that you've actually personally been responsible for 300 people signing up towards this effort. And then when we hit
Oh,
$1 million,
man.
that's something that's locked in. You know, that's what I want to see. I want to see people, rather than just hashtag grow the sport, I want to give them something tangible that they can do, and something tangible after the fact that they can point towards. I mean, think about any popular sports. Like, you know, baseball was what I was addicted to until disc golf kind of weaned me off of my baseball dreams. And
Yeah, me too.
I think about the past and the pioneer days of baseball. How cool would it have been to actually be a part of the very beginnings of baseball becoming rising to the level of popularity that it did? And how cool would it be if your family had something tangible, you know, generations later to point to and say, my dad or my mom played a real significant role, and here's the proof. I mean, to
Yeah,
me,
they
recruited
recruited 685 people. Yeah.
Yeah, we're pioneers here, and it's kind of cool to have a way to quantify that. Or if you don't care about the credit, just the fact that you're actually doing something, knowing that you're doing something. I'm always a little bit jealous of people that work with their hands for a living, because they can frame a house and point to something tangible and say, I did that, and I did it well, and that house, you know, stands for decades. You get a good feeling every time you drive by it.
Yeah. Man, you've been doing a lot of work, obviously, Jack. Great job. Keep up the good work. Hashtag grow the sport, I guess, is where we're headed in that regard. But schooldiscgolf.com, playdiscgolf.org, and soon to come here, isupportdiscgolf.org. And then, obviously, of course, your book here coming out in August, The Disc Golf Revolution.
Yeah. And by the way, if you go on Amazon right now, my first book I didn't publicize at all because I wanted to maintain its value as one of the reward items for the Kickstarter for this book. But my first book is an instructional book called 3 Paths to Better Disc Golf, and you can get that on Amazon right now.
3 Paths to Better Disc Golf. Cool.
3 Paths to Better Disc Golf, and that's basically what I did. Was I looked at a lot of my instructional writing and I edited it, cleaned it up somewhat, and I also broke a lot of different chapters down into 3 main categories, which are the 3 paths. You can either improve as a disc golfer by focusing on your overall philosophy of your approach to the game. You can talk strategically, which is, you know, game management and how do I score lower in disc golf just simply by playing smarter. Or you could do it tactically, which is, in this frame of reference, we're talking about literal, how do I improve my backhand or my sidearm or my putting.
Yeah. So, that sounds really, really similar to an approach that I've been developing over the last handful of years called my MAP. And we'll get into that again another time. But so for the 3 Paths to Better Disc Golf on Amazon, man, you got a ton of these things online, and obviously it's just going to grow. I'm really, really excited to see your idea flourish in the playdiscgolf.org situation, where you're helping people recruit and grow the sport and giving them a reason, a badge to do so.
Yeah, that's the idea.
Going to be a lot of fun to watch.
Once that gets off the ground, there'll be plenty of opportunity for people like you to really carve out a niche too.
Yeah, on the way. You got it.
Right
Perfect.
on.
Well, we'll keep a watch on schooldiscgolf.com. Your book coming out, obviously, like I said, congratulations. Keep us in the loop, and we'll check you out on Facebook, facebook.com/discgolfheaven. Again, Jack Trageser, Jack Tupp, PDGA number 9715. Thank you, Jack. We really, really appreciate your time here at Disc Golf Heaven, and keep up the good work.
Same to you, Jordan. Keep on keeping on.
You got it. We'll talk to you soon.
All right. Take it easy.
Okay. Bye.